Ukrainians just tried to kill Zelensky in a coup assassination attempt. That's
Are we in the lull right now of two dangerous wars, the sort of the calm before the storm? A short time ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin did an interview where he let the cat out of the bag. He declared that the final Russian military objective is not just the 4 former Ukrainian oblasts, which are now part of the Russian Federation. Of course, the world still doesn't recognize them as such, but they voted to become part of the Russian Federation, and Russia, frankly, doesn't seem to care what the rest of the world has to say about the legitimacy of that. But now Putin admits that Novorossiya, and including Ukrainian territory from Kharkiv down to Odessa, capturing Odessa basically would basically turn Ukraine into a...
Yeah, Putin did mention the biolabs when, during the first year of the war, that Russia had captured some biolabs when they rushed towards Kiev.
Landlocked country, therefore not really a country at all. Listen to President Putin just a short time ago.
Правда, в складывающейся ситуации мы не исключаем и возможности попыток со стороны ВСУ, неожиданных, как считает противник, неожиданных для нас, отвлекающих атак с ограниченными задачами силами спецподразделений и с целью отвлечения нашего внимания и наших сил от решения главной задачи – окончательного освобождения непосредственно России.
So that's perhaps a big headline.
Speaking of digital ID, we'll be watching a video on that later. Apparently there's some very bad legislation that's about to be passed through Congress.
While Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, said in an interview with TCN that Putin has basically tasked the Russian General Staff with now calculating various options to end this war and for a massive military operation to capture the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. Listen.
Ми знаємо, що Путін поставив задачу російському генеральному штабу прорахувати різні варіанти ведення наступальної операції, в тому числі з території Білорусі, з метою захоплення Києва, з метою захоплення інших територій, і російський генштаб розрахував декілька варіантів дій.
Options for action coming from Belarus, different directions, we don't know. It's not going to be telegraphed and broadcast on CNN, that's for sure. Is this all happening right now? Colonel Douglas McGregor joins us now, one of the keenest insights and analysts on everything that's happening with Ukraine, and we're going to touch on what's going on with Iran. Colonel, great to see you. Welcome back to the show.
I'm always happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Colonel. I called you General. Colonel, when we look at these latest sort of declarations from the Ukrainian side, seem to be saying, okay, Russia is moving on Odessa, they're going to be moving into Kiev, basically showing their nervousness. What do you make of this? And I know that there are, as you've talked about, many people inside of Russia, and including part of the military staff, that want this to happen. How likely is it to happen, and what sort of timeline are we talking about?
Well, I think we should pause and try to understand what's happening behind the scenes. It may not be expressed publicly, but needs to be understood. And I think the Ukrainian general, I think you said that was Syrsky?
Yeah.
He's the general, been leading the war for the last few years on Ukraine side. I think he's about to be replaced, if he hasn't been replaced already.
Is a nice sort of pictorial display of the state of Ukraine. Have you ever seen a man more entropic, more downcast, more exhausted than this particular general? Yeah. He's reflecting the truth. When he starts talking about the various options under consideration by the Russians, he knows he has nothing that he can match them with. So he's obviously depressed. There's not much he can do if the Russians decide to act decisively. Now that brings us to the next point. For a long time now, there's been enormous discontent inside Russia with these attacks, that for the most part have been pinpricks. But lately, you've had unmanned systems.
I think since about the winter of last year, like around December, Ukrainian drone strikes into Russia really picked up compared to like the year before. And ever since then, there's starting to be some real discontent in Russia about it.
Systems crash into refineries. One crashed into a missile production facility. And I think a lot of people have said, wait a minute, this is outrageous nonsense. This needs to stop. Thirdly, I can tell you from my sources that there are a lot of senior military leaders in Russia who are very unhappy at the failure to have launched decisive offensives to this point. They think it's long overdue and they need to get started. Then finally, and I haven't seen this in the Western press, but I'm told by my reliable sources that there was just an attempt to kill Zelensky, and a plot was discovered by the SBU, that's the Ukrainian secret police, with the help, I assume, of MI6, which is heavily represented in the headquarters, to kill Zelensky, and this has failed. and 7 people were rounded up and promptly shot who apparently were part of this attempt. So I think Zelensky knows he's in a lot of trouble. I think he knows that his government is on very fragile territory. So now let's get back to your question. When
I'm sorry.
I'm wondering who MI6 was planning to replace him with.
All right, before you move on, who would have been responsible for that attempt? Someone within the Ukrainian government, or is it an Alexei Navalny situation? Okay.
No, the 7 Ukrainian officers and government officials. I'm told that at least one of them is a Ukrainian intelligence officer.
So it would be his own government rising up against to remove him since he refuses to hold an election. Okay, that's not surprising, but that's shocking.
No, I think it's very important, and I think it reflects once again what you saw on the face of that Ukrainian general, despair. I think for a long time there are a lot of people who have privately tried to tell Zelensky, or at least impart to him the truth that, look, this needs to end, because the country itself is in ruin.
When you have like 80% or something of Ukrainians that just want this war to end, even if it means basically surrendering to Russia, and you have Zelensky refusing to hold elections. Nothing about Ukraine right now is democratic.
Now, what about these other grandiose ideas of offensives and so forth? From the very beginning, I thought it was very clear that from the Russian standpoint, everything from Kharkov down to Odessa is Russian, and those cities would be Russian again. So I don't think there's any real surprise about that. What's surprising is that now President Putin is making it clear that they're going to do something. President Putin is, if nothing else, he's very methodical. He's very deliberate. He tries to move cautiously. He's been very, very protective of Russian life. If you go back through Russian history and look at the conduct of offensive operations, my God, they spent human lives on a scale we can't imagine, both under the Tsars and then subsequently, the worst of all, of course, under Stalin. I think he is very, very reluctant to do that, but I think he recognizes that he can no longer sit still. He can no longer hold on. I think he's hoped that he was going to get some sort of negotiation, some sort of negotiated agreement. I think he came back from Alaska with a very false impression that the meeting there had meant something. I think it's pretty clear at this point. Alaska was much ado about nothing. It was a reality TV event staged by the director himself, President Trump. Otherwise, there was nothing to it.
We've been hearing about Alaska for so many years now. It just was a big nothing burger in the end.
And that's disappointing because the Russians took it seriously. Not just President Putin, but people in Russia. And even now, people in Russia tend to like us and President Trump and assume that all the problems they've got are with Europeans. And they were really good guys. Well, when $90 billion is on the table for Mr. Zelensky from President Trump, if President Trump turns that money over to him, which I very seriously hope he will not do, that should probably sober them up. And I think they're getting rather tired of that. So I think the final point is this. He's been waiting for these governments in Europe to change. You know, what's happened to Starmer? Well, we get another version of Starmer Light. He's not going to last long. Macron, it's been waiting for him to be overthrown. And Mercer, Merz is the worst, I think, that we've seen in recent years, worse than.
All these 3 governments in France, UK, and Germany are horribly unpopular with the voting public. They're hanging on, and they refuse to give up power.
Merkel. So I think all of this combines to the point where he's told the general staff, all right, you want to do this, let's get it done. And whether he goes first to Odessa and secondly to Kiev is almost irrelevant. There's nothing the Ukrainians can do to stop him. And I think he's probably going to be interested in going to Odessa quickly. He can cross the river north of Zaporizhia, go straight down into Odessa and take it. And at the same time, it's going to be very hard for anybody up in Kiev or anywhere in Ukraine to do anything about it, because he's also got forces up in Belarus, including, I'm told, 20 to 30,000 North Korean troops, along with thousands of Russian and Belarusian troops. They can move down on Kiev, and he can move from where he is now in Sumy and past these 3 fortress cities that are in the center that are about to fall. They've all been evacuated. Wow. And go straight into Kiev. So I think there's an opportunity here for him to end the war, but it has taken this long for President Putin to finally give up on the negotiated outcome and give up on President Trump and his goodwill.
Well, to listen to the Americans and the shills that pop up on Fox News or other channels, Ukraine is winning.
Right now, if you go to Belarus and you're born there and citizens there, there's a good chance you'll be forced into selective service. But Russia isn't using the draft right now, and I don't think Belarus would either, but I'm sure there are patriotic people in Belarus that are, when threatened by Ukraine, join up.
Here is Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. Try to keep your water in your mouth, Colonel, if you can. Here is General Keith Kellogg. This is his voice in an interview, basically saying, you know, once Ukraine got through the winter, they are winning. Now, take a listen.
And once they got through winter, I had said repeatedly on the public TV as well, that the spring, the summer, and the fall would turn to Ukraine as an advantage because they don't have the winter pressures on them. And I think that you're seeing that it's starting to change. For the first time since 2023, the Ukrainians are gaining ground.
No, they aren't.
They're able
They
to
aren't.
fight off the Russians.
You can
So
look
I think there is a turning point. I do think that most people are starting to realize that, even the hardcore opponents of Ukraine.
This is just straight up lying. Deep state map. You're saying after the winter things looked up for Ukraine. So after your winter, let's zoom out, and let's say March 1st, after winter. This is March 1st, and then to now. Yeah, it seems like it's all moving in one direction, against Ukraine. This guy's just lying through his teeth.
Now realize that they've held their own and are starting to turn that and are starting to strike deep within Russia, which is important, and attack targets that are important.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think about Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg? Ukraine's winning, Colonel.
Well, whenever you bring on the globalist voices, I heard Neil Ferguson talk about something similar, which is absurd. There's no basis in fact whatsoever. You listen to the various people in academia, in politics, that are going to end up in mainstream media. They're all saying the same thing. He's not a standout by any means. It's all nonsense. But here's the problem. And I've had people say this to me directly. Said, look, okay, I accept the fact that you're right, McGregor. You say the Russian military is greater, stronger, more powerful than it's been in 30 years. And you're saying that this is a force that's ready to fight. It's ready to act decisively. All right. Why hasn't it done that? And if they don't do something, then the only conclusion I can reach is they're not doing something because they can't. And that is the position that people in Washington are taking. And I think President Putin recognizes that. The only way to turn this perception around is to act decisively. So I think we stand an excellent chance of seeing that happen. There are still many naysayers, even in Russia, who say, look, we should do it. We should get it over with. But we've dealt with Putin before. He's very cautious. He's more of a lawyer than a politician. He's more of a lawyer than a soldier. And people complain about that. They like what he's done thus far, but they're disappointed because he hasn't done more. So I'm betting, yes, you're going to see some decisive action in the future. I think he squandered June, unfortunately, which is a good territory to fight on in June, July, and August until mid-September. So now he's got July, August, and mid-September. That's it. After that, things deteriorate. The ground is too soft. The weather goes to hell, and things will be miserable. But I think he realizes they've got to do something. So we'll see what that is. But I think it'll probably be.
I've been calling Putin a little bitch because he's been a little bitch this last year. He's not protecting Russia.
Odessa, and near simultaneously Kiev.
Well, right. If you take a look at this headline from the 6-month-old killed in Ukrainian drone strike on Moscow region, that was just this week. Last week, we had Ukraine using the port of Odessa to reach across the sea and fire on Crimea. So your point is well taken, and we are smart to put ourselves in their shoes. How long would we take this until there was some kind of, we take offensive. This defensive.
About just going somewhere with a projector and play censored BitChute videos in public. Well, I hope you're not talk about more graphic videos on BitChute, because that definitely wouldn't go well. And the problem is, what do you do with the sound? Do you blast sound across the neighborhood? And people be really angry. And you'd have to have the right video and the right opportunity. It'd be difficult to do successfully.
Military action, and they still haven't done it. So I think your point stands, is that Putin has been hoping that eventually diplomacy would be the answer. So, this seems to be the point where the tea leaves show it's not. What do you think?
No, I think your point is legitimate and accurate. I think it's the equivalent or analogous to say we seized northern Mexico all the way down to Guadalajara, and we've sat there now for 3 years looking for a negotiated settlement. And I think suddenly somebody realizes it's not coming, so what are you going to do? Well, you have to move decisively on the capital, and you have to go further south. So I think the Russians have decided that's in fact the case. So I think we're going to see something dramatic.
Before we move on to Iran real quick, I just want to ask you, you've seen the mainstream media headlines. Of course, CNN would love nothing more than to point out that Russia is running out of gas. They're showing They're showing videos of people fighting at gas stations across Russia. There was a fist fight that broke out between people trying to get some gas. They're painting it that Putin's army is now running out. They're having to bring out their steam locomotives again. So has Russia run out of gas?
I was told earlier today.
It's mostly nonsense, except for Crimea, which even before the war, it would always have gas problems during the summer because so many people normally come there for vacation. But with the Ukrainian drone attacks, there's legitimate gas shortages in Crimea. Rest of Moscow, or Russia, there's sporadic gas shortages, but nothing too disruptive.
By someone with precisely that question, and I said, in 2020, we had Antifa riots sponsored and driven by the hard left billionaires all across the United States. And it looked as though the United States on television was falling apart. And they did billions of dollars worth of damage. They killed a couple of hundred people, including 50, 60 policemen. Were we falling apart? Did the government fall? Did everything stop? The answer is obviously no. And the same thing is true in Russia right now. Of course, when you knock out a refinery or two, you're going to have a drop in availability in certain areas. But they're trying to paint a picture of national collapse. And if you want fistfights, come on out where I live in Western Virginia. We'll take you on 66 and 81. We'll find plenty of fistfights out there. I don't think that's indicative of very much other than frustration. And the hotter it gets this summer, the more frustration you're going to see in the United States. Because a lot of the problems with oil and with gasoline and diesel and fertilizer and so forth, those things are going to begin to catch up. What was interesting was to listen to some of the globalists talk about how Russia is on the verge of collapse and Ukraine is hurtling back to victory. And then they turned around and started talking about
the United States is much nearer the edge of collapse, considering the oil shock that's coming.
Well, you know, all the problems that we have are going to catch up with us here in the fall very shortly. Things are going to get tough here economically. So it's an interesting combination.
Yeah.
Do you want to pivot to Iran?
Yeah,
okay, I do want to talk to you about the mission in Lebanon because Israel is now saying we are going to continue to stay in Lebanon. It's not a part of the memorandum of understanding, but we're going to do it. Over the last few days, Israel used a massive explosive to destroy a southern Lebanese town. Now they're saying there was a 200-meter long tunnel. We had to blow it up, but this is one of the largest non-nuclear bombs we've seen used in modern history. The images are astounding. What do you think that was? What could that have possibly? Tell us. What do you militarily? What are we looking at here?
Well, I think you're looking at something similar to our mother of all bombs, you know, the Moab. I suspect this is fuel air explosive, which is very powerful. And this might have been a very large version of that. Now, there are people on the net saying, oh, no, this is a tactical nuclear weapon. The Israelis have this capability they're using. You know, I don't have any evidence for that. And I don't have access to people that could have collected data. Because if it were a tactical nuclear weapon, then I think you would see radiation and we would have sources in space quite capable of detecting that and reporting it. So we'll have to wait and see. But from where I sit, this looks like a lot of fuel air explosive, and it's very devastating. But the more important point that you're making, Natalie, is that Mr. Netanyahu is saying, look, we're there, we're staying, we're not leaving.
You have Israel do that, the MOU is dead. Bombing on that scale against Lebanon.
You have to listen to Netanyahu, and on occasion you need to believe what the man says. He is telling you the truth from his vantage point. He spoke earlier today to a gathering of officers who had been fighting in southern Lebanon. And he was very encouraging to them and telling them, you've done such great things and we're roaring ahead and all this kind of business. But the attitude of the officers in the room where he was sitting, listening to him, was very similar to Sersky. Everybody's sitting with their heads down. There was no response. They're exhausted. They're worn out. They've taken heavy losses. And there was a sense that people really didn't believe that he was going to achieve what he said they were going to achieve. But we have to understand this war with Iran is not over, just as the war in Ukraine is not over. Now, what happens next? I think to some extent you're going to see a shift in emphasis from the Persian Gulf region, the Gulf of Oman, north to Syria, Iraq, Israel, and Lebanon, because we are desperate right now to do damage to Iran. And how can we do damage? Well, we're going to the Kurds. We're hoping that they'll help us against the Iranians. We're trying to enlist the support of the Islamist murderers and killers in Syria who fall under the command of Mr. Erdogan. We've been bribing him to go along with whatever the Israelis want and to sit quietly while he murders Muslim Arabs and Christian Arabs in Gaza. We have bribed and essentially bought the government of Lebanon that has effectively said we'll cede southern Lebanon to the Israelis.
Yeah, the Lebanese government is such a puppet state, such a traitorous puppet state.
Watching northern Iraq, where the Kurds are operating, as well as in Syria, once again trying to stir up some sort of offensive action against the Iranians. We're desperate. We pulled out all the stops. We failed it down in the Gulf. Does it mean that we will never strike down there again? Absolutely not. And I think the MOU isn't worth the paper it's written on. And if the Iranians haven't figured that out yet, then they're not the smart people that I think they are. Because thus far, I think they've handled themselves well. The only thing they should have done, and this goes back, I think, to something you said, Clayton, is instead of responding to our attacks over the weekend, they should have waited until Monday morning and tanked the market.
Right, exactly. Now, I don't know if we have the data here, and if we want to just pull up what Iran just said, just the sort of the final fully implementation.
Because Trump really does attack Iran every time on Friday after the market close. It's so often it's a pattern.
Of this MOU that Iran's saying it's not going to begin this final agreement negotiations until the U.S. fully implements main clauses of this, right? The end of hostilities, maritime de-escalation, immediate oil waivers for Iran, unfreezing of Iranian assets. I mean, that's the key piece. The unfreezing of Iranian assets and get rid of these sanctions, it in many ways precedes the whole discussion about any kind of nuclear program. Iran saying, we're not going to have, put the nuclear thing on the table. We're not going to have a discussion at all until this is the first thing on the list here. It seems like there are total cross purposes on any of this.
Well, I think we have the Zionist-approved representatives in Qatar right now, in Doha, talking to intermediaries about the money. Because UAE and Qatar behind the scenes have said, look, we'll pony up the billions of dollars that is actually Iranian money. We'll pay that up front to get this going. UAE is trying very hard to make peace with Iran, which I think is a smart move, because if they don't, there won't be much left of the UAE. I think Qatar feels the same way.
Yeah, the Gulf states have been trying very hard for peace, except the United States isn't very interested in it, which is a problem.
The Saudis aren't on board yet. I think they're feeling the sting of embarrassment and humiliation. But we at this stage of the game refuse to pay any money. And that's why the UAE and Qatar have stepped in. Now, how will this work out? I don't know. Fortunately, there have been no public announcements about these closed negotiations. I'm one of these people that thinks that the less you hear about a negotiation, the more successful it's likely to be. And maybe they'll have some success, and that will help things along. I don't know. Oh. But I have my doubts. And, you know.
Thanks for the follow, Hassan. Jack's off to Asmongold. It's true.
When somebody asks me, when will this end? I think it ends when we pack our things up and we sail away and fly away and we don't come back. Yeah. That's when it ends. And they say, well, what about the Israelis? And I think everybody in the region has privately concluded, as long as Israel exists in its current form, led by this kind of government, there will be no peace. So that bodes ill for Israel. And again, I point to the 800-pound gorilla sitting in a corner under the control of Mr. Erdogan, who has willingly taken the bribes, taken whatever he could get that he thought was in the interest of the Turkish people. But at some point, he's going to have to be moved off his log and told to get into the pond and fight it out. I don't know when that happens, but I think we're getting closer.
Well, that is true that Turkey has just been straddling the fence since forever. It hasn't, in a way, it's good of Erdogan to have kept Turkey out of any wars. On the other hand, if he never interferes in anything, is he really a regional player?
Well, the bombs keep continuing to fall in both of these wars right now, and it doesn't seem like anyone in the United States is in charge of any of this.
Well, let's give him an odds, because last time we asked you, do you think we'll go to war with Iran? And you said yes by the weekend, and it happened. So I'm going to let you ring in. Like, what are the odds that this war gets to a kinetic phase again by the end of the summer? Let's do that.
And just to be fair, before the colonel predicted and said that was going to happen, people in the comments were like, fearmonger, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And it happened almost to the minute when you predicted that it was going to happen. So yes, if you want to answer Natalie's question this time.
Well, the fearmongers are betting heavily that we've concluded that we cannot win in the Gulf and that there's nothing we can do down there to reverse the situation. I hope they're right. I really do, because I don't see any particular point to carrying on in the Persian Gulf. That's why I said I think at least the top of the administration, their focus is moving north up to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Turkey.
At least one of the reasons for this Iran war and for the Ukraine war is to protect the petrodollar. The United States doesn't want countries like Iran and Russia selling oil in something other than dollars. But in that sense, the Iran war has been a complete failure.
and they're looking for ways there to attack, to undermine, to hurt Iran. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have more strikes in the south. We don't know what is going to happen in the Strait. We don't know what kinds of things could occur that might unravel everything. But at this point, I think the fearmongers, or the people who are saying I'm a fearmonger, they have a point. It looks right now as though President Trump has decided, yes, the damage to the global economy is so great, I can't afford to carry this on. We have to back out. But are we going to get an agreement of any kind? Is he going to declare an end to hostilities?
Trump has decided that, yes, that's why he got the MOU, but he's not willing to concede to Iran, which is like the reason the Strait of Hormuz right now is shut down is because the United States tried to be cute and open up a southern route through the Strait of Hormuz and encouraged ships to go through it. Now, Iran is not going to put up with that shit. So we tried to get ships to go through this area, like this. And Iran attacked the ships, we bombed them, and now the strait is shut down. So his entire point of this MOU, opening the strait, is now lost because Trump couldn't accept Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz.
No, I don't think so. I'd be very surprised if any real enduring agreement of any kind emerged from this whole place.
All right. Well, yeah, my faith is about as optimistic as yours, but it's always carries more weight when it's yours than it's mine. So thank you so much for joining us.
Not necessarily, Natalie. Everybody listens to you.
Problem about being on the path of managed decline like the United States is there's a cliff in terms of our currency and financial system at some point when the world starts really de-dollarizing, when the U.S. loses its status as a reserve currency. It's just economic collapse, financial collapse. There's no easy way out. So there is that cliff. So rather than managed decline, you could say the United States is being pushed towards a cliff. And once the confidence in the dollar finally fades, we fall. It's going to be a rough landing.
They hang on your words.
I don't think so. Well, don't do that, people. I'm just here to learn.
Particularly me, Colonel.
Yeah. Well, if I were you, I'd definitely do that.
Yeah. With bated breath. That's all I do. That's all I do.
Well, thanks.
Colonel, great to see you as always. And happy 4th. Thank you so much, man.
Well, that was a great video over a situation in both Ukraine and the Middle East. I think the odds of violence, at least, is gone down in the Middle East. I think we're just going to have the sporadic bombings that we've been having until the oil crunch comes this summer. I'm not so optimistic on the Ukraine front, however. I think that big escalation is coming on that side. We'll have to wait and see for it. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.